She wasn't supposed to matter. Not to him. Not in that shop. A girl with scuffed sneakers, a soft voice, and a name he never bothered to ask. Gone in moments. Forgotten in seconds. But tucked inside a pocket watch, hidden behind velvet and silence, was a truth powerful enough to shatter everything he thought he knew. What happens when the person you dismissed holds the key to a legacy worth more than time itself? Keep listening. This story changes everything. The bell above the door gave a soft chime as Amara stepped inside. Turner's timepieces and treasures sat nestled between a closed-down diner and a hair salon that smelled faintly of lavender perm solution. The shop was dim, cozy, cluttered in a way that suggested everything had a story, and none of them would tell it easily. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, catching dust in midair like glitter in honeyed light. A vinyl record played faint jazz. Ella Fitzgerald, warm and low. The scent of lemon oil and aged paper lingered like a memory. Amara, just 14, stood quietly in the entryway. Her shoes were scuffed. Her puffed ponytail bobbed gently as she moved. A backpack tugged on one shoulder. Worn denim sleeves pushed to her elbows. She wasn't here to browse. She was looking for something. Something specific. Behind the counter, Elliot Granger, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, glanced over his glasses. "Can I help you, miss?" She walked up, pointed through the glass to a silver pocket watch resting on navy velvet. "May I see that one, please?" Elliot followed her finger, hesitated. "That's a collector's piece," he said, politely clipped. "Handmade, rare, pricey." Amara nodded once. "I know." Elliot studied her. Hoodie, backpack, quiet voice. A teenager, probably just curious. "You might want to look over here," he added, motioning toward a shelf of cheap wind-up trinkets. Amara looked once more at the watch, engraved initials CJ, then slowly turned away. "Thank you," she said softly, stepping back into the fading afternoon sun. The door closed behind her. The bell rang again. Quieter this time. Almost like a sigh. Elliot Granger polished his glasses as Amara exited the store. The pocket watch still sat in its case, untouched, ticking quietly. He hadn't given it much thought. Just another kid. Probably saw it on TikTok or something. Nothing more. But less than 10 minutes later, the bell above the door rang again. This time, a well-dressed couple stepped inside. The man wore a crisp blazer and boat shoes. The woman carried a purse that whispered luxury. Leather soft as butter. Logo small but unmistakable. Elliot's demeanor shifted instantly. "Good afternoon," he greeted with warmth he hadn't shown Amara. "We just got a new shipment of estate pieces. Let me show you something special." He gestured them toward the same glass case, the one with the silver pocket watch, and reached for a key beneath the counter. Outside on the sidewalk, Amara hadn't left. She stood under the awning, tracing the toe of her shoe along a crack in the pavement. Her backpack felt heavier than usual. The sound of laughter drifted from inside the shop, light and pleasant. She didn't press her face to the glass or stare longingly through the door. She just stood there, still as a photograph, then slowly turned and walked away. "Can I ask you something? Have you ever been sized up in a second? Judged before you said a word? Treated like you didn't belong based on your shoes, your skin, your age, or what someone thought they saw? It happens more often than we like to admit." Elliot wasn't cruel. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't say anything harsh. But sometimes, what isn't said speaks louder than words. Sometimes a smile given to one person and withheld from another becomes its own kind of judgment. And for Amara, a girl raised by a grandmother who taught her to speak gently and observe everything, that moment lingered like smoke. The pocket watch wasn't just a curiosity. It was tied to someone important, someone she once knew. But Elliot never asked. He never wondered why she'd come alone, why she'd asked for that specific watch. And maybe right now, someone watching this has felt that same kind of silence. Maybe you're thinking about a time when you were quietly dismissed, or maybe a moment when you did the dismissing. Either way, stories like this ask us to pause, to look again, and to listen for the things that aren't being said. Because sometimes the people who speak the softest carry the most important histories, and sometimes the smallest requests, like asking to see a watch, carry the biggest weight. So what happens next? Let's keep walking with Amara. This story. It's just getting started. The evening settled over Charleston like a wool coat, soft, heavy, and a little too warm for the season. Inside Turner's timepieces and treasures, Elliot Granger locked up for the night, as he had for the last 20 years. Same door, same key. Same habit of tidying up long after the sun had gone. He turned off the jazz, flipped the open sign to closed, and returned to the display case. The silver pocket watch gleamed under the last beam of track lighting. He paused, then opened the glass and picked it up. Not with reverence, just routine. Its weight felt different this time. He flipped it open, wound the key with a few careful clicks. The soft tick resumed. Precise, steady, familiar. But as he turned it over to polish the backplate, something shifted. A faint rattle. Elliot frowned, squinting under his glasses. Gently, he pried open the inner lining. A thin sliver of paper slipped out, tucked behind the velvet padding, yellowed at the edges, folded with care. He unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, looped in careful strokes. To Amara, for the time you gave me when no one else did. Keep creating. Mr. C.J. Langston. Elliot stared. His breath caught. The name rang a bell. A big one. Clarence C.J. Langston. The quiet genius. The self-taught clockmaker turned mechanical artist. His kinetic sculptures were in galleries from New York to Seattle. The man rarely spoke to the press, never gave interviews, but had quietly funded youth workshops all over the South. There were whispers that he'd mentored one student, a girl, but no one ever knew who she was. Until now. Elliot sat down, hard, behind the counter. The same counter where he'd redirected Amara not 5 hours ago. Her voice echoed in his mind. Polite, clear, hopeful. May I see that one, please? And he'd waved her off, suggested trinkets instead. Never asked why she wanted that watch. Never thought there might be a reason. He glanced toward the door, then at the note in his hand. The watch hadn't been hers by price. It had been hers by memory, by connection, and now, maybe by legacy. Outside, the streetlight flickered on, casting a soft glow over the empty sidewalk where she'd stood. The space felt heavier now, not because of the silence, but because of what it had swallowed. How many times, Elliot wondered, had he missed the story behind the customer? How many little things had slipped through his fingers because they didn't look important? He looked back down at the note. Keep creating. It wasn't just a message. It was a reminder. And tomorrow, he knew exactly what he had to do. The next morning, Elliot opened the shop before the sun had fully climbed. The light outside was still soft and blue, like the sky hadn't quite made up its mind. Inside, Turner's felt different, quieter than usual, but not in the comfortable way he was used to, more like a hush before something sacred. He placed the silver pocket watch on the counter, not in the display case, not under glass, right where he could see it, where it belonged. Elliot hadn't slept much. After reading the note, after learning that Amara wasn't just some curious kid, he'd spent half the night online, searching, It didn't take long to find the truth. An old article from the Charleston Post, dated 2 years ago. A photo of a science fair, kids smiling, fold-up tables crowded with wires and circuits. And there, in the corner, a 12-year-old girl holding a strange little mechanical sunflower that turned to follow the light. The headline read, "Young inventor credits local clockmaker for inspiration." Her name was right there, Amara Brooks. He read the article twice, maybe 3 times. She'd met Clarence Langston at a community center program. She used to sit beside him after school, learning how gears fit and springs curled and light could be bent into motion. She had called him Mr. CJ, and he had given her his time. That afternoon, Elliot left the closed sign hanging in the window, even though the sun was still high and business hours weren't over. Inside, the store looked the same. Rows of time-worn clocks, dusty shelves, antique lamps casting amber light. But something had changed. He stood in the back room, measuring tape in one hand, a clipboard in the other. The space had been used for storage mostly. Boxes of old receipts, tarnished brass, forgotten radios with missing knobs. But now he saw something different. A workshop. A place with a long table, a pegboard with tools, bins labeled with little parts, gears, wires, screws, a space that could welcome young hands, curious minds, kids who, like Amara, saw magic in movement and memory. He wasn't sure exactly how to build it yet, but he knew why he had to. Later that week, he called the community center where C.J. Langston had volunteered, left a voicemail. Then he reached out to the local high school, talked to a science teacher named Mrs. Hampton, who nearly choked up when she heard Amara's name. "She's one of our brightest," she said. "Never asks for attention, just does the work." Elliot nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I'd like to offer her a space," he said. "To create, maybe to teach others." There was a pause. "Mr. Granger," she said, voice soft. "I think that would mean a lot to her." And it would, because a week later, Amara returned. Not as a customer, not as a quiet girl misunderstood, but as someone seen. Elliot guided her to the back. It wasn't finished yet, but she lit up at the sight of the bare table, the empty bins, the workbench waiting. "You think this could work?" he asked, a little uncertain. She smiled for the first time. "It already does." From that day forward, Turner's Treasures began to hum in a new rhythm. Once a week, Amara met with kids from the neighborhood, showing them how to build tiny wind-up toys, clock mechanisms, even a robotic flower that followed the light. Elliot stayed close, but not too close. He knew when to step back. Redemption doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it starts with a broom, a cleared table, a single chair pulled out for someone younger. And as he watched Amara laugh with the others, sleeves rolled up, fingers smudged with graphite, he understood. He hadn't just restored a back room, he'd opened a door. And this time, he wasn't the one holding the key. Absolutely. Here's the 480-word narrative for Idea 7, the seed of change, joy, and hope. Directly continuing from Idea 6, this chapter shows how a simple act of restoration begins to ripple outward, creating new joy and meaning, not only for Amara, but for Elliot and the entire community. It's grounded in American cultural values like mentorship, community service, and legacy. By spring, Turner's Timepieces and Treasures had become something different. Not just a place to buy vintage clocks or admire dusty heirlooms, but a space that pulsed with life. Like a metronome ticking steady at the heart of a small but growing rhythm. Every Thursday afternoon, the shop welcomed a group of wide-eyed middle schoolers, their laughter spilling through the open door like fresh air. They came with notebooks, messy backpacks, and minds full of ideas. Amara stood at the head of the long table in the back room, showing them how to sketch gear systems or solder wires without burning their fingertips. Elliot watched from the counter, polishing watches that didn't need polishing, just so he could stay close. She was good with them, patient but firm. She never raised her voice, but when she spoke, they listened. And when they stumbled, she didn't fix their work. She asked questions, guided their hands, let them figure it out. That's how CJ had taught her. A sign now hung above the workshop door. Langston's Lab, where little things turn big ideas. The name had been Amara's idea. Elliot paid for the sign, but she wrote the motto. He hadn't known a shop could feel like this. Light, busy, full of purpose. Sometimes he caught himself smiling for no reason. Sometimes he didn't recognize the man in the mirror, and that was okay. The community noticed, too. Parents stopped in, curious. Teachers volunteered their time. Even the mayor came by once, snapping a photo with Amara beside her robotic flower, now displayed in the front window. That same week, an envelope arrived from the Langston estate. Inside was a handwritten note from CJ's sister. "Thank you for honoring my brother the way he would have wanted, through learning, not plaques." It ended with a donation check, a generous one, enough to expand the lab, buy new tools, maybe even offer scholarships. Elliot read the letter 3 times, then he tucked it into the same drawer where he'd once found Amara's note. That night, as he turned off the lights and watched the workshop glow under the overhead lamp, he realized something. He had misjudged a moment, but gained a future. And for Amara, she hadn't just reclaimed a memory. She had built something new, a space not only for herself, but for others who'd one day walk in wearing the wrong shoes, the wrong look, the wrong assumptions on their shoulders, and find they belonged anyway. Because when you plant a seed in the right hands, you don't just grow flowers, you grow change, of course. Here's the 250-word narrative for Idea 8, a lasting note, reflective ending, closely tied to Idea 7. This conclusion offers a warm, reflective close with a gentle tone, leaving your American audience with a sense of peace, purpose, and a quiet invitation to think about the small acts that leave the biggest marks. The seasons shifted again. Spring folded into summer. The air grew heavier, thick with honeysuckle and laughter from kids who now called Turner's more than a shop. It was their space, too. Elliot moved slower these days, but something about that felt right. Purpose has a way of softening the weight of time. On a quiet Monday, when the workshop sat empty and the street outside hummed with stillness, Elliot stood at the counter, placing the final touch on the wall behind it. A small bronze plaque. It read, "In honor of those who saw what others missed." The little things we overlook may be the very things that change everything. He stepped back and looked around. The shop hadn't changed much, really. Same clocks, same old floors, same bell above the door. But now it carried something richer, a hum beneath the silence, like the ticking of a well-kept heart. Amara walked in, holding a new project under her arm. She didn't say much, just smiled, like they both understood something too big for words. And maybe that's the truth. Some legacies aren't loud. They're tucked behind watch faces, hidden in scribbled notes, planted in quiet hands that build without asking to be seen. As Elliot turned the open sign back around, he thought to himself, we all have a choice, to overlook or to look again. And sometimes, looking again is how the best stories begin. Maybe you've been like Elliot, quick to judge, too busy to look twice. Or maybe you've been like Amara, overlooked, underestimated, quietly carrying more value than anyone realizes. In today's world, it's easy to move fast, to assume, to miss the stories hiding behind simple faces and soft voices. But just like that watch in the display case, people often hold hidden layers of purpose, history, and beauty if we take the time to see them. So here's the lesson. Slow down, look again, and lead with empathy. Whether you're at work, in your community, or just passing someone on the street, every encounter matters. You never know what legacy you're standing in front of. If this story moved you, reminded you of something personal, or made you see the world a little differently, hit that subscribe button. Join our growing community of story lovers, because the best lessons are often tucked inside the quietest moments.